James Patrick Clark, Memoirs. Jimmy was born in Winona, Minnesota on January 11, 1932, to William and Jeanette Clark. His parents were married on November 19, 1930. Jeanette was 6 years older than Bill. Jeanette taught school in Randolph until Jimmy was born. They went to church in Northfield until they moved to Farmington. Jeanette's family. Jeanette and her twin, Genevieve, were number 9 and 10 in the family. They were born in 1898. Genevieve died in 1954 of breast cancer. Magina, real name Gertrude, taught school in Seattle, Washington for 50 years. The boys that Jimmy could remember were John, who died in 1941 of TB, Robert, who lived in Santa Barbara, and Ted. Elizabeth was the oldest. She was a nurse. We would often visit her at her house in Winona. Bill and John liked to throw her cane down the clothes chute, and she couldn't find it for days. When Elizabeth died, 96 years old, Jimmy, John, and Kathy went to the funeral in Winona. John lifted up the bottom of the casket to see if she had shoes and underwear on. Jimmy said we were lucky we didn't tip the casket over. Earliest memories. Jimmy said he liked fishing with his dog, Wawa, on the creek by his house. He enjoyed the Farm Bureau picnics that were held every summer in someone's pasture. There were usually about 100 people, and it lasted all day. The whole county would come for the picnic. They ran races. Jimmy said he once won a yellow and red rubber ball. He had it for years. Every 10 days in Randolph they had movie night. All 302 people in town showed up. They sat on blankets and watched cowboy movies. Moved around. They lived in Randolph until Jimmy was in 5th grade. They had to move from the house they were renting in Randolph because the farmer's daughter got married, and she wanted to live in the house on the farm. They moved to Hampton for 1 year. Then they moved to Farmington in 1945 when Jimmy was 13 years old. Schooling. Jimmy started school in Randolph, Minnesota. All the grades were in one school building. For the 1 year they lived in Hampton, Jimmy went to a Catholic school and completed 6th grade. They moved to Farmington, and he started 7th grade there. He graduated from high school in 1950. He was the president of his class all 4 years of high school. It was an elected position. Quite a character. One time in 2nd grade, 1st and 2nd were in the same room. The teacher brought a clown suit to school. She had Jimmy put it on and told him to entertain the class while she corrected some tests. She gave Jimmy a ball, and he pretended to juggle it and drop it. He would shake hands with the kids while juggling the ball. Acted in plays. In 2nd or 3rd grade, Jimmy was in a play where he was in a scene with a girl who was singing. Jimmy's lines were ya-ya. The girl sang, "We are going to be married. You can tell Pa, because he won't mind." Jimmy would insert the words ya-ya after every verse. Jimmy said he was a teacher's highlight. When asked why that was, he said whenever they wanted someone to portray a main character in a play, they would pick him. He was Tiny Tim in the high school Christmas program. He also had the main lead in 2 different plays when he was a junior and senior in high school. Side note. Jimmy said his dad was in plays. Someone wrote a play every summer, and Billy would act in those plays. The plays were put on in a barn. All the neighbors would attend. That must be where he got his talent from. Plus, that talent was passed down to his kids and grandchildren. High school sports. He was always hanging out on the football field. In 8th grade, the coach asked him to be the manager. He didn't play football in high school. He played basketball, baseball, and track. He said in basketball, he would make a screen for Dickie, and that would allow Dickie to shoot. Jimmy said he didn't do a lot of shooting. Dickie and McDermott did all the shooting. In baseball, Jimmy played shortstop or in the outfield. He said he was a pretty good hitter. In track, he did everything. 2 different hurdles, highs and lows, 400, some relays. Jimmy said he and McDermott were the whole track team. Jimmy also said that McDermott was the star of all the sports teams in high school. In the summer of his junior year, Jimmy went to Gopher Boys State in St. Paul, Minnesota. They set up the government routine, policies, college. Jimmy started college at St. Mary's Catholic College in Winona. Magina gave him money to go there. He was with the rich Chicago kids, and he said it was a wasted year and a mistake to go there. He then went to Winona State for 1.5 years, until he got a letter from Uncle Sam telling him he was drafted. At Winona State, 1951-1952, Jimmy played football, basketball, and ran track. He was in the Drake Relays in Des Moines, Iowa, in 51 or 52. He ran in the 800 relay races. They got 6th place. They give ribbons for the top 5. He said he played too many sports in college. His grades suffered. When he came back from the war, a teacher told him to go to another school and start over with a clean slate. He transferred to Mankato State in the fall of 1955. He didn't play any sports there. He just studied. He graduated in 1958, after 2.5 years at Mankato State, with a degree in physical education and health college sports. Although Jimmy didn't play football in high school, he said in college they needed bodies on the field to scrimmage. He ended up playing quarterback. Jimmy said the team wasn't very good. They didn't have a lot of talent. They only won 2 or 3 games both seasons he was there. In basketball, he played guard. He said he didn't score a lot, but he played a lot. The most points he scored in a game was probably 8. In track, he pole vaulted, ran the low hurdles and a couple relays. Korean War. In January of 1953, Jimmy went to Fort Riley, Kansas for basic training. It was 16 weeks long, extra long. He went to basic training with Bill Amond, redhead, from Farmington. They were taught how to fire weapons and how to run a camp compass, especially at night. He had to do a lot of KP duty. After basic training, they flew to Seattle, Washington, and got on a ship with 3,000 other GIs. They spent 16 days on the Pacific Ocean. They played a lot of cards and bingo on the ship. He said the food on the ship was the worst food he ever ate. They stopped in Iwo Jima, Japan, to have 2 weeks of CBR school. Chemical, biological, radiological. They landed in Busan, South Korea. They were shipped up to the front lines on a train. In the Army, Jimmy was a supply sergeant. He was in charge of ordering supplies. He had duty to patrol the DMZ, demilitarized zone. While in Korea, he was allowed to take some R&R. He flew to Japan to see the sights and eat some good food. He stayed in barracks. He bought a dress suit, one you'd wear to church on Sunday. Jeanette wrote to Jimmy every week, and he wrote back to her every week as well. There were a few guys from Farmington over in Korea the same time as Jimmy. They were the Shirley twins, Robert and Roger, Jim Gerster, Joe Aiken. Jimmy returned from Korea in December of 1954. He was in the Korea for 14 months. Employment. Jimmy's first job out of college was at St. Adrian High School in Adrian, Minnesota. The school had 100 kids in it. He was the only male teacher there. He taught English, science, and physical education. It was while he was teaching in Adrian that he met Mary Louise Hill at a wedding dance, 1958 or 1959. They were married on August 27, 1960. Jimmy worked for Vita Plus from 1959 to 1964. He started working in the factory. Lyle, Mary's dad and founder of Vita Plus, moved Jimmy to Green Bay because he thought Jimmy would be a good salesman. He actually started the territory in Green Bay. Then Lyle wanted Jimmy back in Madison to sell in the #1 territory. Jimmy didn't really like working as a salesman. He started subbing at the Madison schools for almost a year. He took some special education credits during the summer. Then he got a job in Oregon. He was the only male teacher for the couple years that he taught there. Jimmy started the special education program in Oregon. While in Oregon, he helped coach football for 2 seasons, 1964 and 1965. They went undefeated in 1964 and were league champs. It was in Oregon where he got his nickname, Hubba Hubba, Dan Kissling, Boob's son, said they told Jimmy to start warming up the team on the field. When the Kisslings came outside, Jimmy was saying, "Come on, guys. Hubba, hubba." He was repeating it over and over again. Jimmy said that meant, "Let's go." The Madison School District wanted Jimmy, male teacher, to go to Longfellow School to teach special education. He met John Lohr, the captain, while he was subbing, and then he worked with him at Longfellow. He taught there for 7 years. Jimmy transferred to Madison East High School in 1972 and taught for 21 years until he retired in 1993. He was an assistant football coach for 21 years at East. He coached the freshmen for 6-7 weeks, and then helped varsity after the freshman season was over. One of Jimmy's freshman players went on to play at UW-Madison in the NFL for 11 years. Love and marriage. Jim and Mary were married on August 27, 1960. Their honeymoon was in northern Wisconsin, staying at Catherine's cabin. They swam and Opa fished. Oma laid out to get a suntan. They went out to eat for all meals at Northern Air, big-time nightclub. They met some of Oma's friends and went out to eat with them 1 or 2 times. They traveled to the Upper Peninsula and saw the highlights, waterfalls and lakes. That's about it. I put this marriage in rhyme. As for the honeymoon, it was the thrill of a lifetime. Not quite 9 months after their wedding, they had twin baby boys, John and Bill, born 4 weeks early. This was followed by Kathy and then Joan. Then they had twin baby boys again, Mike and Dan. They knew they were having twins both times, but they didn't tell anyone the second time. They were pretty excited about having twins both times. John Lohr, captain. Lohr worked as a janitor for many years at Longfellow School. There were 2 other janitors there. The night janitor died, and a year later, the head janitor died. Lohr decided he better get out of there before he died too. He became the substitute janitor for all Madison schools. While Jimmy was teaching at East, he would often stop at the captain's house for a can of beer because it was halfway home from East to his home in Fitchburg. Jimmy said he called Lohr's house the halfway house. One time, Jimmy and Lohr drove out to pick up some firewood in the country. While they were there, they saw an old bathtub with 4 legs. Lohr asked the woman if he could buy it. She told him he could have it for free. They tied it to the top of the pickup truck. On the way home, they stopped at a tavern for a cold one. When they got out of the truck, a lady was passing by. The captain said to Jimmy, "Remember, I get to take the first bath." Jimmy said the woman is probably still talking about that. One year on the way to deer camp, they stopped at a bar, and Lohr's car engine was smoking. The captain opened the hood and peed on it to put the fire out. When they went into the bar, everyone was clapping and cheering for him. They could see out the window, so they gave him a standing ovation. Fishing in Canada. Every year around Memorial Day weekend, Saturday to Saturday, a group went fishing in Canada. Perry Annan, Tom Kretschmann, George Bunders, Buck Pleeger, and Ron Tues, Tuna. Tuna only went before they knew Buck. They went 22 years with Buck to his property. They went a number of years before they knew Buck. There were 2 people to a boat, Jimmy and George, Perry and Tom, and Buck and a buddy of his. One year, the basket of fish they had caught got dislodged from the boat. They couldn't find it. The next day, they were in the same area, and Jimmy hooked it with his line. Buck always did all the cooking. When they weren't with Buck, everyone helped with the cooking, except Jimmy and Tom. They did the dishes. One year, Jimmy had a new swimsuit that Oma got for him, probably at a garage sale. He dove into the water and came up without the suit on. It was too big, but probably a good deal. Another time it was so hot, everyone took off all their clothes and jumped in the water. Deer hunting. All the same guys went deer hunting, except for Buck Pleeger. They slept in campers. Lohr had a camper which he and Baggett slept in. In Jimmy's camper there were Tom Kretschmann, George and Eric Bunders, Mike, Dan, and Jimmy. Lohr didn't go very far from camp to hunt. He would sit in a chair and drink blackberry brandy and smoke cigars while he hunted. Side note, Jimmy and Laura went to Baggett's wake, and Jimmy wore his bright orange union suit. Baggett's wife thanked him for doing that and said it was the best part of the wake. Harvest Haven. In his retirement, Lyle started Harvest Haven, a pick-your-own-produce farm in the late 70s. Everybody worked there. It sold all kinds of produce. Strawberries were big. You could get out to the field in the berry bus or the U-Pick Express. Pumpkins were also a big hit. Many schools and groups came out for field trips and tours. Lyle did most of the tours. He would give each kid a coloring book, which he designed with pictures of fruits and vegetables. They would get to take home a small pumpkin and gourd. Opa and all the Clark kids worked in the fields, running the cash register in the store and working at farmers' markets and roadside stands selling produce. We all learned a good work ethic. Harvest Haven was a fun place to be, picking veggies down on your knee.